Hello and welcome to your training on supporting student wellbeing during these unprecedented times and going back to school post-pandemic. So why wellbeing? Why are we focusing on this? We'll go into all that as well, and I also want to talk to you very briefly about who I am and why I feel so passionately about this subject as well. So I've been teaching in UK secondary schools for 14 years, and I learnt very early on how important relationships and wellbeing are in teaching. And if you're curious about my story and my turbulent start into the profession, you can check out a podcast episode, which I'll link to shortly, about my experience, especially my first few years of teaching, and why I developed such a passion for well-being and relationship building. So back in 2013, I founded Teachers Resource Force, and I'll talk to you more about what that is and how it can benefit you in your teaching. I then, as I mentioned earlier, published a teacher wellbeing podcast for 2 years called Teach On, Teach Strong. And there's lots of episodes that you can go back and listen to there that will help you with teacher wellbeing. They're great to listen to on the commute, for example. And now I tend to focus on nurturing wellbeing and developing character in students. That's my goal and my passion. The mental health of our youth is more fragile than it ever has been. And this year in particular has turned everything on its head and thrown everything up in the air. So mental health and well-being is more important than it ever has been. And that's why we need to focus on well-being as we go back to school. Life has changed, and especially post-pandemic, we can't just hit play and carry on as usual. So much has happened, so much has changed, and that's what we need to be focusing on. So in this training on student wellbeing, we will cover the following. We will reflect on the challenges faced so far this year, or there are many, and what impact these changes have had on our young people, and why we need this period of readjustment where we focus on well-being. We'll also look at what preparations you might want to make before the new school year starts in order to support your students' well-being. And we're also going to talk about how you can better prepare for blended learning as well. So I'll incorporate those elements within this too. And finally, we're going to look at how to form, build, and invest in relationships during this transition period. It is certainly more challenging if we are doing that by remote learning, but of course, even by social distancing, it's just going to be different than it ever has been. So we'll look at ways that we can still build those relationships during these different times that we're living in. So our students are facing new struggles as they go back to school this school year, different to any that they've had before. We might have new groups of students coming together. For example, if they are starting a new school, you've got a new group together, but they're not able to necessarily make friends while being socially distant. It's a challenge for them to make friends while having to separate themselves. In general, social distancing and having spent so much time away from their current friends is a struggle. Building relationships between students and staff after being apart from so long is also a struggle. Being away from school for such a long period of time is a struggle. This is the longest that our young people will ever have been away from school before. We're looking over 6 months. That's unheard of. And so there's going to be a period of time where it's going to be difficult for them to transition back into the routines that we set for them. Some might have been lacking the personal discipline to work independently from home during this time as well. So these kinds of struggles are new to our young people as well as teachers. So we need to bear these kinds of things in mind as they're coming back to school. So how is this back to school different? Well, we've got 3 things here that we're going to look at. First of all, so much school has been missed. As we said before, this is the longest period of time that students have spent away from school. They might have fears such as falling behind academically, or they might have had strained family relations as a result of being quarantined together. Socially isolated, well, no doubt about it. Social isolation is going to have had an impact on our young people. They might be worried about their relationships with their peers and teachers after such a long absence, and learning how to socialise face to face might be difficult for them as they haven't probably done it for so long. And general anxiety about the world is different. 2020 has been quite the year so far. Many significant events have happened already. Aside from the global pandemic, there was the tragic public murder of George Floyd. We've got the protests that followed that. We've got the Australian fires and the floods, to name but a few. There are lots of events being kind of thrown at us this year, and our students are having to process these emotions and fears about the future and life in general, which is going to have effects on their well-being as well. So a new normal is what we're aiming for. A new normal needs a new focus. We need to focus on new things because the world is not, as we said before, cannot just press play and go back to how it was. We need a new way of working. So there are 5 things that we're going to try and focus on. First of all, let's try and focus on the opportunities more than the problems. There are many problems that we can look at, but also there are opportunities to do things differently and to possibly even do things even better than they were before. So let's try and look for those opportunities rather than mourning the way it was before. Let's also focus on how to keep students engaged in their learning, particularly if there's going to be elements of remote learning still integrated or having to be socially distanced. Let's work on how can we keep them engaged in this new way that we're going to be working. Let's focus on being innovative and inventive. This is an opportunity for us to reshape things and reshape education and reshape how our students are going to learn. We can also focus on nurturing students in the transition to school. How can we make this as easy for them and as natural for them as possible in this new environment? And let's focus on making plans for blended learning, because that, I think, is the way forward. Technology is only getting stronger, as it always has been. So let's work on how we can blend technology into our teaching as well. Okay, so where do we begin? Where do we start? Good question. I say let's start by reconnecting before school begins. Let's start making those connections with home, with our students before they come back to school. Information needs to be shared between school and home in order to strengthen the confidence, in particular of parents who are returning their children to school. And also so that you may learn what parents have discovered about their own children during this time. So it's an opportunity for schools and home to kind of share information about the child, maybe how they're doing, what kind of fears they've got, how they've been working from home, and let's try and bridge the gap between the long absence and going back to school. It's important to acknowledge that each of our students are very likely to have had different experiences while being in lockdown and in quarantine in their absence during school. Some children may have struggled while in isolation at home. They might have missed the interaction with friends and going out and doing sports and all their activities, and they might really have found it really, really difficult. Some, however, might have thrived with less stimulation, reduced social complexity, lower demands on them, and the opportunity to set their own pace in their day-to-day routine. Some might have actually loved this, and you might have found as well that some of your students really thrived in this environment. Some may have weakened social and communication skills due to the insufficient use while isolated as well. And that's not all of them. I'm sure there are more different experiences, but you'll learn about those shortly, and I'll show you how. As we said, everyone's probably had a very unique experience, so let's create opportunities for them to tell you their stories. And you can use what they share. It helps you inform the type of support that each individual student may need when returning to school. So find out what happened to them, how did they feel, and use that to guide you in supporting them with their well-being. So how can we find out their story? Well, here's one example. You could give them a journal such as this one. Now this particular one, it's the same kind of thing, but the one on the left is for younger students and the one on the right is for older students. So here's an example of how you could do this. So you could ask them just to think back of some memories, and for the younger ones they might just want to draw or write simple sentences, and for your older students or more advanced students you might actually want them to write a story for you. So talk about what their experience of lockdown was. What did they do? What new things did they learn? How did they spend their time? What were some of the struggles and their happiest moments? And you'd be amazed when you give students the opportunity to share. Generally, they really do love telling their story and knowing that someone cares enough to learn about their experiences. And you can use this information to help you. So if you know a student has really struggled and they're really clear about what they struggled with, you can support them in that particular area when they come back, and vice versa. So here's a full journal that you could use with your students as they come back to school. So I've called this Back to School After Lockdown Journal. And the pages on the top row are for the younger students, and the pages in the bottom row are for the older students. So they're very similar, they're just slightly differentiated depending on the age group of students that you have. And I'm going to give you a quick flick through of this journal and show you what's included as well. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through the slides of this lockdown journal. This is for the older students, and I'll show you what kind of things are included and how this might help you with your students and to help them with their well-being. So as I showed you earlier, one of the first things you can do is just ask them to share their experiences. By all means, take as many pages as you want on this one and let them just write away. Asking them how they feel is really important as well. There was some keywords at the bottom there to get them inspired by what they want to write about, but generally acknowledging that all feelings are normal and really learning to understand what drives your particular students, how they are feeling, will help you when you come to support them as they come back to school. It's always good to put a positive spin on things, I think. So once they've identified how they're feeling, if they found that they're feeling quite negative, so they're feeling really anxious and nervous and they feel a bit sick, or they're worried about their grades, what they can do is put a positive spin on it. So they identify the negative thought on one side, and then the other they put a positive spin. So example I gave them here is, I'm worried I will have forgotten everything I've learnt. So a positive spin might be, well, everyone's missed the same amount of school and we can catch up together. So it helps them kind of put things into perspective and look for the positive as much as possible. Identifying their well-being. Now this is crucial for them to help them kind of self-soothe, as I like to call it. So first thing that they're asked to do is make a list of what makes them feel happy or what distracts them from their worries. Identify people who are important to them and how they might be able to connect with them, and what actually do they want out of their own life. What are their passions and how can they use these to help other people. And having this kind of information just gets students to think positively about themselves and about their experiences in life as well, and that really does help with well-being. Going back to school is obviously going to throw a lot of concerns up in the air for your students. So finding out what your particular school plans are will help ease some of those concerns. I think a lot of the concerns right now result from no one really knowing what's going to happen. And I talked to loads of different people and everyone seems to be doing something different. There is no one set way of doing things. So we can't rely on what other people are doing either. So they need to know what their school specifically is doing. So they need to identify what is going to be the same as before, like what is standard, what is to be expected, what is going to be really different than how it was before, and what are they not sure about. They don't know how this element's going to work, like how is lunchtime going to work and how break time is going to be structured so that we're not all together in the same place at the same time. So they might have these questions. So whatever plan your school has put out there for students, they can use that as a reference to fill in the first two columns, and then anything they're not sure about, that's going to be really insightful for you to see, because then you can determine, oh, actually, they've raised a good point. I don't know how that's going to work, or I didn't think that they'd be worried about that. Let's make sure that we inform them. Questions to ask. So they can use the previous slide of things that they're not sure about to come up with some questions. So what kind of things are they wondering? And you might be surprised at some of the things that they're curious about. It might be more friendship related stuff. It might be more academic stuff. You don't know. So find out what is important to them. And this is great for particular individual students as well. So if you have students who might have special needs, for example, it might highlight what their particular fears are that might be different from another student's. So this is also really helpful information for you to help you tailor the needs to your individual students, as well as generally finding out what the school body feel about coming back to school and what some of the things that they are concerned about. And then finally, come to school with a plan. I think that's always gives you some kind of control, which helps with well-being as well. Even if things don't always go to plan, knowing that you have a plan in place does help. So the first thing they're going to look at is what works best for them. How do they prefer working? Do they prefer working alone, working with other people, using technology? There are many examples that you can use, but generally asking students to find out what helps them function best will help them come up with a good plan. So they might prefer being completely isolated, and they can then use that to help them feel a bit more comfortable coming back to school. Having a list of people who are supportive for them, so teachers, friends and family, list them all below so that if ever they're in a pickle, they know who they can go to for support. And finally, what can they do for self-care? What can they do if they find themselves feeling anxious or worried? What helps them feel better that they can lift their mood? And so instead of when they have feelings of panic and worry, instead of sort of getting stuck in those feelings, they can come to this list and go, well, actually, I find that playing a musical instrument really relaxes me, so I'll do that now that I feel really stressed out. Well, I've got something that I can do that will help lift my mood. And it's just giving that control back that really does support them with their well-being. So this is the senior version. I'll quickly flip through the junior version. It's very similar but slightly more simplified. So this one's got a slightly different font, which you'll notice, a bit more easy to read for the younger students. So this one is a little bit different, but generally the same. A little bit about me, what makes me happy, and who are some people that make me happy as well. So it's a similar kind of concept of helping them determine what and who make me happy. Some memories that they've had of lockdown, just 3 simple things that stood out to them, good or bad. And then try and help them, remind them what they liked about school, because it's been a long time, especially for the younger ones. So what are 4 things that they liked about school? So they can draw or write about some of their experiences in this page here. And this is the same as the senior version. So what has changed in school? What's going to be the same? What's different? What are they not sure about? Same as before, what are some questions that you have? That'd be interesting to hear what the younger ones think about that as well. And then a back to school plan for them too. A lot more simplified, just names of people who can support you if you get stuck, and what can you do to make yourself feel better if you're ever feeling sad or worried. And you'll find all the answers to these questions will be really insightful. What is it that your students actually want? What are their fears? What are their concerns? Find out how they're feeling. Especially because usually you can just look at when a student might be feeling down. You can tell when something's on their mind, and you can look at them and ask them what's up and what's wrong. It's difficult to do that in this current climate. Not only are we socially distanced, but if you're having to wear masks, for example, it can make it more difficult to see facial expressions, which we'll talk about later as well. But having a journal like this, whether you do this before they come back to school, would be ideal. But even if you do it in the first week of coming back to school, it will really help you find out what's really going on in there and help them to kind of self-navigate as well and take a bit of control back of their own well-being. Now, good news is these journals I'm giving to you for free. Yes, for free, completely yours for just turning up to this session, and I hope they'll help you. So I'll give you information of how you can access all of these things at the end of this training. And I hope you enjoy them, and I hope you find them helpful. So So I've scattered a few of these blended learning tips throughout this presentation because I kind of want to show you how to integrate technology within your back to school plan. And I'm doing this through blended learning tips. So every now and then I'll scatter one of these if I think there's a tech savvy way of doing something that will help you. So back to these journals, there are digital journals as well. So you don't just have to print those and post them off to your students, which will be very costly and time consuming. You can do it digitally as well. So here's an example of a digital version of this journal. And as you can see, these are in Google Slides. And what that means is students can type directly on the document and send them to you remotely. So here, as you can see, this is an image where the background is completely secured. So no matter how many times your students click on the background, it won't move anything around for them. But the boxes here are editable. So they can easily type in their answers straight on this document, and then they can share this Google slide with you so you can see all their results from the comfort of your computer at home. It is very convenient, and I'll show you how to do that now. So I don't know if you use Google Classroom in your school, but it's a tremendous tool if you do use it or if you're thinking about using it. It is absolutely changed my teaching. It made blended learning so much easier, and going paperless actually helped make my life easier as well. If you're interested in learning a bit more about Google Classroom and how you can set assignments and provide feedback and everything within Google Classroom using Google Slides and things like that, there is actually a free Google Classroom course that I've created for you. It's about 45 minutes long, and it will show you how to use it for your remote learning in particular. So I'll be sure to link that in the end of this presentation for you as well. And please do check it out if this is something you're interested in, because it will drastically change how you work for the better. And as I said right at the beginning, this is the kind of opportunities that we're looking for. How can we be innovative? How can we use these opportunities to make things better? And you'll find not having to take home bags of marking and grading with you is going to make your life significantly better, knowing that you can access all student work from the comfort of your computer. So if you don't do that already, I highly recommend checking that out. I think you'll find it really helpful. Okay, another blended learning tip are digital questionnaires. So we talked a lot about getting students to kind of express themselves through a journal. Let's take that a step further, helping you to analyze results a bit more easily. And we're going to do that through questionnaires. So here are examples of 3 questionnaires for younger students, older students, and for parents. And yes, these are free for you as well, and I'll show you how they work. But generally, they are digital questionnaires that you send a link to the students or to home. They fill it out, you get the results immediately, and because we're using Google Forms here, it will actually put the results into graphs for you as well, so you can analyze collective feedback, but you can also go through each individual response and see what they said about particular things as well. So let's dig in and look at some of the questions that you could ask for the questionnaires. Here is an example of the older students' version of the wellbeing check-in. So you'll see this form and you can actually edit it. You'll have editing rights when you download it, so you can change this information at the top if you want. But generally it's just saying, hey, we care about you, please answer the questions so we can have an idea of how to support you. There's no wrong answers, blah, blah, blah. So your students write their name, and then you can ask them, how have you been spending your time while at home? What have you been doing? And there's all these different options, and of course they can write other if they've been doing things that you've not put on there. So that'll be interesting, first of all, to see kind of how conscientious they are. What have they been doing with their free time? Are they learning a new skill? That'd be a great use of the free time, or are they not? How have they been staying connected? That's important, so you can know how they're able to still keep in touch with family and friends. Which of these have they been doing? And if they haven't, that might be something you want to flag up to make sure that they're okay, if they haven't had any interaction with anyone else. How have they been connecting online? So what method are they using in particular? Have they been able to talk about how they're feeling? So if they haven't and they've been completely holding it all in, you might want to do a personal one-on-one check-in with students like that, just to make sure have they had access to nature and fresh air. Obviously, as many students are in different living environments. If they haven't, then it might be someone you want to check in on, just to make sure they're okay as well. How engaged were they with their schoolwork? That's an interesting one to see. How much support did they receive? We know not all students are going to have the same amount of support, nor do they want the support. So if they've worked completely on their own, you might want to check in on them compared to if they've had a lot of support. How has their learning been affected? Are they doing better or are they doing worse? How challenging did they find the work that was set? If it's not challenging at all, that gives you an opportunity to kind of reflect on practice and think, how can we extend and challenge our students a bit more? If it's too challenging, do we need to tone things down a bit? Maybe not. It's just information for you that's really helpful. How concerned are you about the lockdown affecting your learning and education? That's a crucial one. How would you rate the overall enjoyment of the lockdown period? What are the best parts about school being closed? What's the hardest part about school being closed? What activities have you found to make you feel better? And what questions and concerns do you have? Is there something you would like your teachers to know? I love finishing on questions like this. It's just open-ended and just says, like, hey, if there's anything you want to talk about, I'm here. It gives them an opportunity to speak. And as we know, the more you share, it kind of takes the weight off and it helps you support them a lot better as well. So you can modify these questions by all means. You don't have to include all of them, or have different options if you want. I'll show you what it looks like when you edit it. So here you've got an option to change the text and you can edit them here. And when you get the responses, they will be listed here and they will come in the form of graphs if they were multiple choice questions, and you'll see the text if they were text-based questions as well. So it's a really handy tool to see how students are actually feeling collectively and what things they have in common and what differences you might often see. The younger student version is very similar. So how they've been spending their time. I've taken off more of the social media for the younger ones because technically I imagine they're underage for many of them. But you can put them back in if you think they're using them. Have they been able to talk? I've left this just yes or no rather than ratings, just to keep things a bit more simple. And the other questions are very similar. And then for the home one, this is directed to parents and carers at home. So they give their child name and their relation. And then there are some questions that I think will be really insightful to learn from parents and carers. So how did they feel their child coped? Because they're going to see a different thing, and it'll be very interesting to compare their response with their child's response, because that will be quite revealing as well. Not in a judgment way, but just as a curious to see how students are internalizing and processing these new experiences. So how did they think their child was engaged during learning? How much support did they actually request? So if they didn't request any, we can ask, how did they do not requesting support? Do they need to be requesting support? Will it actually help them? How did they think the child found the work? Was it challenging? And rating their child's self-discipline to work without requiring prompting. I think that'll be interesting, because then we'll determine who is being conscientious, actually cares about their learning, and who just needs to be nagged to get out of bed. How were they able to organise themselves and deadlines? How concerned are they about them integrating with their peers again? So we're getting the parents' fears here as well, and that will help you kind of set things in place. And if you know that the parent is really concerned about that, you can then take methods to try and make that process a bit easier and have transition periods where the students might get together or speak over a Zoom call or something before they come back to school to help ease that pressure. How concerned are they about their child's education, and how do they think they feel about going back to school here as well? I do have a bit more on this one. So that's the first one, which is just multiple choice. I'll show you an edited version because I have to fill out the answers to get to the next page. And then here we ask specific details here. So what's something new you learned about your child? What worked well with distance learning and what didn't? What have you discovered about your child and the way that they learn best? I think that'd be an interesting question. What concerns do you have about sending your child back to school? How could the school support you if blended learning was to be part of child's education? And again, my favourite general question, what's something that you would like the staff to know before you send your child back to school? So these will be incredibly insightful for you as you go back to school. In particular, monitoring the well-being of your students and getting the parental and home insight is also going to be very, very interesting as well. So yes, by all means, use these for free, edit them however you wish, modify them slightly to suit your needs. That's absolutely fine. I hope you find these helpful as well. Okay, let's look a bit at building relationships during remote learning in particular, because we don't know for sure exactly what's going to happen. And like I said before, everyone might do something different. You might have an element of in-school and remote. And there are many fears around, if we are doing remote learning, how are your students going to build those relationships? So here are 3 fun ideas that you could do on online calls, for example, to help build relationships. And I'll talk you through about each of these 3 things in a minute. But if you do want to read more about this, I am writing a few articles on the blog at the minute that might support you. And here is one in particular that might help, which is called Building Classroom Community After Lockdown. And here is the current article, and there are more coming, so be sure to check in. And that goes through some examples of things that you could do. We've got different resources that might support you, check-ins, more resources that I haven't talked about yet that might support you. But here are the 3 that I wanted to show you for the scavenger hunt, virtual show and tell, and virtual contest. A scavenger hunt is quite a straightforward activity, but it's a lot of fun to do online. So all you need to do is create a list of items that are found around the home, like a plant pot or a sock or a pen, and then students have to go as fast as they can, sensibly, fast as they can, to bring back said item in their home and show it on the screen. And it's quite amusing seeing the huge range of different styles that there are of these items around the home. And you could then reward points to people who find them first, or for example, who finds the best one, and just make a little game out of it. Activity 2, the virtual show and tell, is like a regular show and tell where students will prepare something that they want to share with the class and they can talk about it in front of their peers. But you just do it online instead of in person. But the benefits are the same. Students will be learning about one another and hopefully finding things in common as they do these show and tell activities. And finally, the virtual contest. So this is kind of like a talent show where a student has to perform a special talent of theirs. It'd be great if it was something new that they learnt while in quarantine, but that's up to you to set the rules. It could be music, art, or maybe even their favourite TikTok dances. And by students sharing these special talent, each student feels valued and listened to, and they get to share a side of themselves. And that helps their classmates get to know everyone better and find things in common, which all of these things contribute to a sense of belonging, strong classroom community, which ultimately strengthens their well-being as well. Be sure to check out that article and any other ones that are upcoming over the next couple of months to give you some more ideas as well. So some more ideas for building relationships during remote learning, similar to the forms I've given you before for wellbeing, but these ones are Google Forms that are around get to know you. So you can download these from shop.trf.one. I'll give you the link to everything and show you more about these resources in a minute. But this helps your students give you some more insights into their personality and their interests beyond just the walls of lockdown. Literally, this is talking about them as a person, and these kinds of things really help you build relationships with your students as well. I'll tell you a short story. I once had a new group of students who I'd taken over, and within a couple of months, one of them had to move schools, and I wanted to get her a little gift, but I didn't know her too well. And so I was struggling to make a personalized gift without knowing her extremely well. And so what I did is I went back to my Google Forms here that I did at the start of the school year, and I found some of her hobbies and interests, and I was able to create a small little keyring that signify things that she was passionate about, and she absolutely loved it. And it's so much more personal than just a regular box of chocolates, for example, although that's better than nothing. These personal touches not only help form relationships with the students you've got, but the rest of the class saw what I did for her as well. And that just kind of strengthened our bond. They was like, that's so nice that you did that for her. And that kind of makes them see you in a different way as well. And it just helps that relationship build really well. So do check out these kinds of Google Forms as well. I'll show you what they look like. When you download the form, you'll see there are 3 in a folder here. So we've got an all about me. And so we've got what they prefer to be called. That's always a handy one. Date of birth, what foods they like, animals, hobbies, sports, subjects, career interests, favourite TV shows, countries, greatest fears, greatest achievements, hardest experience, most embarrassing moment. Oh my goodness, I got some gems out of this question. There were some that didn't write anything, but the few I got had me in stitches, and we were able to have little private jokes about their embarrassing moments, which is really amusing. Something that annoys you, big life goal, who inspires you, and some random facts as well. You get some really cool responses out of those. We've got this or that. These are sort of quick fire responses, and they're quite insightful too, and very easy to complete, and they don't mind doing these. So English, maths, backpack, art, music, reading, writing, detention or a call home, what kind of breaks, days of the week, group work or individual. That's actually quite a handy one to know as well. Fixed or flexible seating, questions like essay, warm, cold. So I've thrown a few personal ones and some school related ones that help you actually learn a bit about them as a student as well. Breakfast, lunch, indoor, outdoor, there you go, late or really early. There's loads here. Oh, I think I've got like 30 odd. There we go. So there's lots of options that you can choose from there to get to know them. For parents and guardians, so what they think their child's strengths are, what do they need to work on the most, are they excited about their child experiencing, what are their fears and concerns, what they're most looking forward to, what do they like to do outside of school. It's particularly good for new parents of new students that you've got. What do you expect from me? What can I expect from you? Anything else you'd like me to know, and contact details. So there you go, that's those Google Forms, and I'll link to this at the end of this presentation as well, so you can access them if you want them. Another way you can build relationships during remote learning is with morning meetings, or these are things like you do during tutor time if you're from the UK, for example. And they're just great fun ways to start the day. And this one is free, it's a whole week's worth, so that's 5 days. And as you can see, there are different themes for each day of the week. So we've got Motivational Mondays, where you have a quote and some prompts to think about. True or False Tuesday, Wellness Wednesday, Think About It Thursday, Funny Friday. So each day of the week it's got a statement or a quote and then some prompts for them to think about or do. And this can be done in person or online. And they're just great ways to get the class together and thinking about really important topics that support well-being as well as building community. So those are free for you to access as well. Okay, let's talk about health fears, because we are coming back to school post-pandemic and we can't sort of breeze past the fact that there are health concerns going back to school. And recently there were surveys done to a large group of students, and these were some of the top fears that students had, in particular about health going back to school, and they're not surprising. They're afraid of getting the virus, they're afraid of spreading the virus, and they're afraid of their loved ones getting COVID-19 as well. So these are fears that students have, as well as teachers. Absolutely. So it's something that we need to be mindful of and bear in mind. And I'm sure your school is doing everything it can to make sure all the rules are abided by. But there are some things that we can do just to remind students as well, and ease some of these fears, but keep them abiding by the rules. So let's reassure them and keep them safe. So remind students about the positives of coming back to school, because fear can stop them from doing that, and there are many who are afraid. So remind them that they'll be able to see their friends and their teachers if they're physically coming back to school, and they'll continue learning new things. So try and remind them what they love about school. And this is why this journal that I showed you right in the beginning is handy, because it does get them thinking about what are they excited about going back to school as well, and kind of get them in that mood. Reassure students about safety measures in place. So what do you have in place in school that's going to keep them safe? And what can they do? So washing their hands and coughing, sneezing into the elbow, these kinds of things, just to try and remind them to minimize the risks. Reassure them that the emotions that they're feeling are healthy. It's good to talk about their emotions and their worries. And I imagine there are going to be some upset and frustrated students having to wear masks if your school's making them wear masks, and they're going to be in the way when running or playing. I've seen many videos online of people describing what they think it's going to look like when we go back to school with masks, and they're quite amusing and quite frightening, being used as slingshots and tissues and all sorts of things. So be ready for all of this, I would say, and make sure you've got some rules in place for sensible use of masks and stuff like that. Let's reassure students that there are many people working hard to keep their families safe, okay? But we all need to make sure that we're sticking by the measures to take care of everyone in the community, including their families. So it's important that they abide by these rules and are not being silly with masks and other things like that, and they are taking this seriously, but not to the point where they are terrified of being in school. It's a difficult balance for sure. It's very likely that social distance and PPE is likely to be needed for a long time, and my concern about this is this going to provide fuel for bullying around contagion? Are they going to be, are these conversations going to be happening? Like, hey, you got the virus, and every time someone coughs. We need to be mindful of that happening as well, and try and stay on top of bullying and just be aware of these kind of conversations happening and nipping them in the bud. And similarly, be aware of the rise in instances of racism around the coronavirus. Particularly my concern is for the Asian community where the virus originated. I did see many issues right at the beginning when it first started, and on TikTok and things, people were making very inappropriate jokes towards the Asian community, and I actually found it quite distressing. So I created this free resource back in February, I think it was, and I updated it in March to help schools address this kind of thing that was happening. I'll quickly give you a flick through of this product as well to show you it's still very relevant and it's an important conversation to have with young people. Okay, so here's what you'll get in this resource. So there's a short little video that introduces the virus right when it was first starting out, but by all means you're welcome to update this to a more recent video if you wish. So what are their feelings about the virus? What are they worried about? Some facts about it, where it came from. How's it spread? Text is all editable, so if you feel like you want to update it to more recent information, then by all means do so, but it's there for you to use as a starting point. Obviously that's changed since we updated last. So this is where it really got interesting, where the reactions from people had changed. It wasn't all just concern. There were some people who were making light of the situation, making fun of the situation, and making racist jokes. And that's when I kind of thought this has to be addressed, because young people need guidance here. So we have an example where people can share things that they thought were racist. And this bit's interesting. There are 3 TikTok videos that I found right at the beginning of people making fun of Chinese in particular about the virus, and this is where the discussion is based around. So you can show these videos and get their feedback on what they think. Did they find them funny? Are they doing this just for clout and popularity on social media, for example? And if people laugh, does it make it okay? And these are important conversations to have to address these kinds of issues. Why do people make fun? I mean, it's just a good general bullying one in overall, but it's important to understand why people do what they do. So you can go through these and you're welcome to have a look. And this is an example of a Chinese woman's reaction to the racism she was hearing, and it kind of changes the mindset a bit when you see someone actually really genuinely suffering, and how they can help. So you're welcome to download this resource for free and adapt it however you wish, and use it with your students if you are concerned about any racism or bullying going on around coronavirus. Okay, let's briefly talk about masks. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I kind of just wanted to lightly touch on this because there are some concerns I have. Will covering your face scare the students? I don't know about you, but I find even walking around the shops, people seem very uneasy. When you wear a mask, people do stare, and I'm concerned, are they staring because they can't read the facial expressions? And how are our students going to respond? Not being able to tell when you're smiling or when you're cross, or what effect is that going to have? Not being able to see your smile in particular. And yes, there are options. You can perhaps wear visors and things like that. But I did want to show you something that I thought was, well, just to make this bit lighthearted, and I thought was really funny. But actually I could see how this would work. So I wanted to share this video with you. Another video I found of an NHS worker on TikTok, and she gave me permission to share this video with you. So I hope you like this and at least find it funny, if anything.
Oh, it gets better. Oh my god. I am gonna scare children with this. Oh my god. Oh, how funny are they?
No, I don't know about you, but every time I watch that, I can't stop giggling. I think it's really funny, but also, like, just seeing her smile made me smile, right? And I don't know if it did the same for you. Even though it wasn't a real smile, technically, it's just a mask, I just wanted to smile back at her. And so I think there's something there with that. Initially, I know it was a laugh, and she said initially she bought them for face recognition on her phone, which didn't work, by the way. But I saw it, and I know she said, I'm going to scare children, but I thought, actually, I don't know, I think there's something in there. I think just seeing the smile makes everything better. I just think it just made a really big difference. So yeah, if you're interested in getting those, I'll put a link to where she said she bought it from, and by all means try it out and see how it goes. And regarding safety, I had another little idea that you might already be doing this, but because we can't share items in school, I think it's important to have a little kit or a box where you can keep things for each individual student that they might need to, reduce the risk of spread and increase hygiene and things. So you could create a little box for each student that can go under their chair or somewhere where they're sitting on their desk, and it's something they could carry around to each lesson, especially if they're in secondary school. And obviously keep things like hand sanitizer, some spare masks, because I don't know, I can see that getting messy, so it's good to have some backups. Disposable gloves might be handy, some tissues, a pencil case that they literally need to get better about bringing their own pencils now, kids. Like, there's no excuse, we can't be sharing someone else's pencil now. They need their own equipment, so something that is just theirs, and disinfectant wipes that they can clean their desks down as well at the start of each lesson. So put together a little COVID kit, and that's just going to have to be the new thing, I think, just to make sure that everything is kept hygienic as much as possible. So if you weren't already doing that, there is a little tip for you as well. Okay, let's blend the technology back in. I want to show you another website that might help in particular with well-being, but it's also academic as well, and that's something called WebDecks. So I want to show you this site. It looks like this, and you've got the option of some educational decks which are fully interactive, so they don't need any teacher marking, which is great. But also you can do some digital coloring, which, if you know anything about mindfulness and coloring, it is a super relaxing activity that many people enjoy. And I've created a digital version for you. It's the first of its kind that I'm aware of, so I really hope that it helps. And I want to give you a quick tour of this site and show you how you can access them. Okay, so this is the WebDex site, and here is what you get. So there are currently four different categories, but I'm adding more as time goes on. I want to show you these ones first. So let's go to word searches. And what you'll get is you'll have a teacher account that can access all the decks, and you'll also automatically get a student account attached to it. So the benefit of that is the students won't be able to access my account and your password and all that information. So it's great at keeping them separate for students to use as well. But you're able to access it too, so that you can set assignments as well. So these are word searches. Now they are digital word searches, and as you'll see, many of the topics will actually really help with well-being. So we've got things like anxiety, facts about the brain, we've got these fun ones that are themed, growth mindset is in there, stress, to name but a few. And it is a growing collection, and so I'm adding more to these as time goes on. So let's take this character education one, for example, and I'll show you what the students will see. Just going to zoom out a bit. So they will see a regular word search and the words at the bottom here. And what you do is you highlight when you see a word, and then the timer will start. And the great thing about this is that not only can students play over and over again and try and beat their score, but I'll show you something else in a minute that makes this even more fun. Is if I were to refresh this page now. Remember where this word was, character was second, on the second row. If I refresh, the words have changed position. So basically, every single game is a brand new experience for them. So every time you refresh, it's like a brand new game. And this repetition of seeing the same words over and over and over again helps with spelling as well as with vocabulary. Now the words do go in all directions. I just find it obviously much easier to find the horizontal ones, but they do go diagonally and back to front as well to make it more challenging. But it is more challenging. Clearly, I have not found any of them yet. You might be able to see them and are screaming at me right now. I can't see it. So it is challenging for them, and it can take quite a lot of time, which is great, really, especially if they are themed around particular topics that you are interested in. And like I said, they can beat their time and refresh it and play it numerous times until they are happy with their score, or if they're competing against someone, they can take a screenshot of their score and put it in a public forum like Google Classroom, for example. So that's the word searches. I will show you some of the other ones as well. We've also got true or false decks. So these have similar topics. Again, they are growing collection. So currently we've got anxiety, the brain, Earth Day, weird body facts, world record, coronavirus, and stress. So let's do this one. And what you'll see is a statement will come up, and then you've got a choice to click true or false. Okay, so we'll start the quiz. So consuming caffeine and sugar helps improve stress. Right, so they'll click the answer and then they will get a confirmation. If they got it right, it will say, yes, you were right to say that. And if they got it wrong, they'll give you the correct answer. Setting goals can help deal with stress. So if I click false, you'll see that's wrong, because setting goals can help you act more strategically. So it helps with fact memorization as well as teaching them right answers as well. So they can play that and again try and get their score increased by memorizing the facts. So those are them. And we've also got interactive lessons. Now this is a new one, so there's only a couple here at the minute, but they are growing. And what I especially like about these is the fact that they are completely interactive. So you've got answers given immediately, so students can get feedback straight away, and they can do this independently, and you just need to set it and forget it. My favorite activity. So let's do this one on resilience. So there's a short video to watch, and then they have to decide, are these good coping mechanisms, good or bad, right? And then it tells them right away their response. Here we've got, okay, how would they define resilience? So there you go. So that was one was correct. So it's not giving up when things get difficult. So we've got immediate feedback on all these kinds of topics here. So what can affect your resilience? And then they're given some scenarios as well. So if you've got lots of homework and your teacher tells you she's setting a pop quiz, how would you respond? So these are scenarios that students might find themselves in, and they have to decide, okay, what should I actually do? Do I yell? I've had that happen to me, saying, we've already got too much. That's not a very resilient response. Or could they set aside time to complete the homework and spend the rest of the time studying? There might be more than one right answer. I'm correct. So they really have to think, okay, what would actually be the sensible thing to do here? And there are a couple more scenarios too. And some actionable steps to build resilience, and another motivational video at the end, followed by an inspirational quote. So these are really interactive, and students can get immediate feedback on their answers, which is really helpful for them as well. And then there are the colouring decks. So if well-being is the focus, this is very helpful. Now, if you're not quite sold on colouring, I'll take you to my site, and if you go to teacher training and go to Mindfulness Coloring, clearly it's one of a passion of mine, because I create a lot of quote colouring pages in particular that are very popular with students. There is a whole research as to why this is a thing, and it's not just fluffy, let's get them colouring. It's actually scientifically based to be beneficial for mindfulness and well-being. So if you're not sold and you want to learn how it might help, be sure to check this page out. If you want a bit of science, they say colouring is said to calm the part of the brain related to fear and stress response, while it stimulates the parts of the brain responsible for creativity and logic. So it is very helpful for well-being and calming. Now, not all students respond to it, but from my experience, it's a very small minority who don't. So it's worth giving it a shot. And if your students enjoy it, then you've found something that helps them with their well-being. So be sure to check that article out if you're interested. And let's go to digital colouring. Now, this is a unique thing that I've created. So these are digital colouring pages. I have printable versions of all of these already, and I wanted to turn them into digital because, you know, like I said right at the beginning, we're looking for opportunities, and we want to be inventive, and we want to be innovative. So I modified it to be suitable for the remote learning world we're in right now, and technology being quite prominent. So these work in the way normal colouring pages would. However, they are all done on screen, and you don't need any software, nothing. It is purely running right off this site. All they need is the link. So students will choose a colour, and they can pick any colour they want, which you can't do when you're using colouring pencils. You are very limited. And then they can colour in on screen. Now, the reason this one is staying in between the lines is because I'm using something called a magic brush here. So this one stays within the lines. If you want them to have more control, and maybe they want to practice mouse control, you can, there you go, you can do this so it's going slightly outside the line as well. It works on touch screen devices, so if you use your finger, it will work as well, so they can do it on any device like their phone or tablet or a touchscreen computer as well. You can do everything you would expect. You can change the size of the brush, you can change the colours, you can zoom in, zoom out, you can download them once they're finished so that you can have them maybe as screensavers, or to send them as notes to someone, or to print them off if you wish. The options are there for you as well. And it's just a calming activity to sit and do without needing to print off loads of paper, without needing to have an abundance of colouring pens and pencils everywhere, which again, we want to avoid touching stuff with contamination. So if everyone's just got their own device and they've got their own finger, they've got their own screen, we don't need to touch paper, we don't need to touch pencils. It's just a much cleaner, more effective way of doing this. And because colouring is such a calming, relaxing activity to do, it's wonderful to set as a task. So if you have access to the WebDecks site, your students have complete access to all the decks on there, and more are being added regularly as I make them. And if they have requests, this is both students and teachers, you can make requests and just fill in a very short Google form. So say I would like a request for an interactive lesson, and then you can leave your topic here, submit, and as I get them through, if there are any that I think actually, yeah, that's a good idea, or quite a few people are saying the same thing, I'll make sure I'll pop them out and put them in there for no extra charge. So it's worth checking that out as well. So if you're curious how this site works, basically there are 3 different membership levels. Now this is in dollars, so if you're working in pounds, bear in mind the number's actually a lot lower in pounds, but it's actually very, very cost effective if you want a large group of students. For example, if you choose 200, which is usually a cohort of students in a year group, for example, it only comes to $1 per student for the entire year. Which is like 60 pence if you're in the UK. So they have access to all the resources for an entire year, and they have unlimited access to everything. If you are an individual class teacher and you don't think your admin will go for a higher one, a whole class alone, 35 is generally more than an average class, hopefully. So yours is about $89.99 a year, and that's only $250 per student for the entire year. And then if you've got a small club of students for 5 or less, which might be great for parents as well, then it's $40 for the year. So you're welcome to access them. Now, if you want to try it out for free first, I'm giving you exclusive access to get a week's free. So you can try it out and see for yourself whether your students or your children enjoy it. And I'll add the link to how you can get that at the end of this presentation, where I show you where you can get links to all the things that we're talking about. So I hope you enjoy using this site and find it valuable, especially for well-being, and great during times of social distancing as well, where you don't want to touch other resources. Right, so those are the WebDecks, and that's the WebDecks site and resource that you are able to access. A few other resources I just want to show you that might help with this are as follows. This is a goal setting journal. Now I'm not going to go through the whole resource for you, but I will link to it at the end so you can peruse these at your leisure before you decide whether you want to use them or not. But this one guides students through how to set goals and in order to actually achieve them. And there is a PowerPoint lesson that goes with it, as well as a journal that they can use to help them in the process of setting goals and, again, achieving well-being. This one is a specific well-being journal which goes through many reflection processes. There are trackers for habits and mood and exercise and sleep and other things like that might be useful for your students. Here is a type of morning meeting based on character development, which will be helpful. So there are 10 different character traits, one for each month of a school year, and there's enough prompts and daily prompts here, as you can see, with a journal for every single day of the school year. And there is a free sample on resilience that you can try, which has got a PowerPoint and a journal to see how your students respond and whether you think this is something that you might want to invest in this school year as well. There's also this study from home journal that might be useful for helping students who are having to stick with the distance learning. And there are also, as you can see, some tips for well-being as well here. So we've got some tips for study spaces, for screen time, for physical activities, and as well as planning their time. And then finally, I'm going to leave you with this one, a gratitude journal, because this really does help with well-being. When you're looking for the good, it's very hard to feel sad in that exact moment. So something that I've often encouraged students to do is take some time. This is just one prompt per day if you want, or one a week, just to really think about what they're grateful for. And there is a prompt to guide them to think of something new each time, so you're not always thinking of the same things. So you can have a free sample for 1 month to try it out as well with your students. Again, I'll link to all that in the end as well. Okay, so that's everything. Let's summarize what we've gone over so far. So first thing we want to do is reconnect with students and parents before going back to school. You can use the back to school journal to do that, just to kind of get their stories and how they're feeling. You can try out digital journals as part of the blended learning and take the free Google Classroom course. Use digital questionnaires for students and parents to kind of gauge the well-being and determine any fears, and collectively determine how your students are feeling as a class or a cohort. Get creative when building relationships with students during remote learning or distance learning. consider the health risks and social challenges of wearing masks in school and what ways we can possibly get around them. And try out a range of resources for promoting well-being, such as using the web decks. You might use the different types of journals I showed you, or the morning meeting activities, and just really spend some time nurturing their well-being as they go back to school. So that's it for now. I really hope you found this helpful and that it's giving you some new ideas to take away and implement straight away in your school. If you want to hear some more from me, and if you're interested in other things that you might be able to learn, you are welcome to check out my Facebook page. You can check me out on Instagram, lots of inspiration on Pinterest, the blog. You can always email me personally if you have any questions, and you can pop onto the store if there's any particular resources that you want as well. And for all the resources and links mentioned today, there is a special web page that you can go to where I've linked everything we've talked about. So you can check that out here. It's teachersresourceforce.com/summer festival, and you can access everything, including this presentation. You've got the back to school journals, the Google Classroom course, the questionnaires, the article that I linked to, get to know you forms, morning meetings, coronavirus discussion, the face mask, that is, you can actually buy that, guys, if you want that, the WebDex membership, the goal setting journal, wellbeing journal, the character education morning meetings, study from home, and the gratitude journal, as well as all the links. So I hope you've learned a lot in this and all those resources are helpful. It is now Q&A time, and you can always email me at katie@teachersresourceforce.com as well if you think of anything later. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.